We are recording. Well, welcome, folks. My name is Jordan Peterson. I'm the Director of Business Development for Aurora Behavioral Health System, our hospitals here in Arizona. And today I'm very excited. Our presenter is someone that I've gotten to know quite a bit over the past couple of years. And every time I interact with her, it is just an utter delight. And when she was finishing up her grad program, I pretty much just harassed her a little bit and said, hey, as soon as you graduate or as soon as we can afterward, we want you as a CEU speaker. You have to come and talk at Aurora. And right when that happened, I think the pandemic started. So it's taken a little while, but I've been very excited for this day for a while. So let me introduce our speaker for today. Her name is Erin Callinan. She has her master's degree in social work. She is the founder of Peace of My Mind, a mental health network of peers and professionals striving to end stigma and normalize honest conversations about mental health. In 2013, Erin authored and published Beautifully Bipolar, an inspiring look into mental illness. That's a great book, by the way, I've read it. And began her career in mental health advocacy and motivational speaking. Erin holds a Master of Social Work from Arizona State University and a BA in Elementary Education from the University of Arizona. She has 13 years of nonprofit leadership experience in both the mental health and anti-violence field. Erin most recently served as the Executive Director of Mental Health America of Arizona and was the recipient of the Emerging Leader of the Year Award by the National Association of Social Workers Arizona in 2017. In addition to leading Peace of My Mind, Erin is the Director of Training and Intervention Services at Bloom 365, a teen dating violence prevention organization. Erin oversees the Youth Violence Intervention and Prevention Project and works to increase protective factors for youth using violence and abuse. For 7 years, she served as the Director of Domestic Violence Response Initiatives at the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence, and prior to that as the Domestic Violence Shelter Manager at a crisis shelter in her hometown of Flagstaff, Arizona. Erin has had the privilege of facilitating training in 23 different states for a variety of disciplines and settings, including prisons, hospitals, crisis shelters, police headquarters, and military bases. Erin's proudest moment is being a mentor at Pathways for Youth, where she just celebrated 9 years with her mentee, who is now 15 years old. So without further ado, folks, I'm going to pass this on over to our speaker today, Erin Callinan. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you so much, Jordan. It's such an opportunity and a privilege to be here with all of you. A big shout out to Aurora for hosting me and allowing me to, be here in this afternoon and speak on such an important topic to all of us. So thank you for carving out time to be here with me. We're going to talk about some of the stigmas, some of the pressures that many individuals face in terms of having to keep it together while living with a mental illness. As you heard, I've had a few different professional opportunities and experiences, both personally in my journey of living with a mental health, but I feel really honored and blessed to have worked alongside so many of you and be both in the domestic violence field and the mental health field. So again, thank you for joining me in this new space today. I have transitioned out of Mental Health America of Arizona to explore and pursue full-time my organization, Peace of My Mind, which I originally started in 2013 after publishing my book. So you have my contact information here. I would love to stay in touch with you. We have some really exciting things happening at Peace of My Mind. As Jordan stated, our mission is to remove stigma and normalize honest conversations about mental health. I know that many of you share in this mission as well. So my goal with Peace of My Mind is really to develop a network of peers, professionals, family members, community members, so that together we can break down some of the stereotypes and talk about the subjects that we often don't talk about. So I hope that you'll join me. We have a lot of exciting things coming up to share a little bit more about what we're doing. So our values are kind of based around these three different really belief systems. One is that people who are living with mental health conditions are people first. When we look at how stigma impacts our own perceptions of our experience, our surroundings, the world, we often place those labels and diagnoses on people, which then follow them around, which they often internalize. And so Peace of My Mind really believes that people are people first, and the diagnosis, the struggle, the challenge that we may experience is a piece of who we are, but there's a larger sense of how we show up in this world. And so it's important for us that we honor and recognize that. We also believe that showing up for people in authentic ways can change and save lives. We really are living in a cancel culture right now. And while I think there is certainly space for that, I also think we live in a place of fear that if we talk about mental health, maybe if we open up or we ask somebody who maybe we're worried about, we might do the wrong thing. We might say the wrong thing. And so we get caught up in that self-criticism of, how do I share my own experience? What might they think? How do I check in on somebody that I'm worried about? At the end of the day, in my experience and those that I've had the opportunity to work with over the last 13 years, is that human to human contact, that authentic, honest, I'm showing up for you, I'm here, that oftentimes is way more powerful than a hotline number, than a resource card, than a direct contact to an organization. Now, I have utilized all of those things. So they certainly have their place and they are incredibly important. However, being authentic in who we are and how we are connecting with other people who may be struggling is really kind of the bread and butter of Peace of My Mind. And then finally, speaking respectfully, honestly, from our own experience, that is a really powerful and courageous way to reduce stigma and promote hope. There is a lot of doom and gloom surrounding mental health. And while there are absolute crises that people endure on a daily basis, having somebody, having organizations, having networks of communities to reach out to who can help inspire, who can share messages that, you know, it can get better, that healing and recovery and services and people that care are absolutely available. So we've got some exciting things coming up. These are going to begin in May. So one is our podcast, Through the Mess, Mental Health Unfiltered. And we will have a whole lot of different folks from around the country join us. So I encourage you to tune into that. We also are starting the Peace of My Mind project. I feel incredibly lucky that I've been able to collaborate and network with all of you and meet some of the most incredible, resilient humans along my journey. And so I wanted to create a platform for other people with lived experience of mental health, trauma, domestic or sexual violence to share their story, to either through written word, through music, arts, whatever their creative outlet is, where's the space for them to share? And so I really want to uplift other people with lived experience and help support them through this speakers bureau. And we will be working with another individual. His name is AJ, and he also has lived experience with SMI. And he's a creative writing instructor. And so come summertime, we're going to be offering free creative writing classes through the Peace of My Mind project, with the hopes that individuals who complete the project will then in turn get connected to some of the publishers that we work with, should they choose to move forward in sharing their experiences. Thank you so much for those of you who are introducing yourself in the chat box. It really means a lot, and it also allows us to build, excuse me, to build some community with those of us who are here in the room. We also provide training, so I will send out a flyer after our presentation today, but we've got two really exciting trainings coming up. I'll be co-facilitating with our speaker, Ron Blake, who is a survivor of sexual assault and lives with PTSD. He also provides comedy. He is a nationally recognized public speaker. And so as we move through this kind of stigma reduction series, I hope that you can join us next Wednesday, as well as on April 14th, where I will be joined with the founder and CEO, Francine Sumner, and she's a dear friend and colleague, and she's going to share a bit about her experience of reducing stigma, promoting hope, and sharing awareness after she lost her son to a suicide, and therefore created her organization called Kid in the Corner. So with that, let's dive in. Visit our website if you want more information about what Peace of My Mind is doing. While we're here together in this space, again, I recognize it's the lunch hour. So I hope that you are joining us with some good, yummy food, drinks in front of you. We're going to be talking about the difference between public and internalized stigma, and what are some of the messages that it sends not only to the community, but to the individual who may be struggling about the masks, the faces that we wear when we navigate the world, and whether or not that reflects the emotion and what's really going on deep down. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at implicit bias and how that shapes our perceptions of the world around us. And then I'm going to provide some ideas and strategies, both that I've learned professionally, also from others who are peers, and then personally, as far as what can we do to not only advocate for ourselves, for others, for systems change when it comes to mental health and wellness, but also how can we stand up as allies in this field? So diving in, this is the new norm, right? This is the world that we're living in right now. So I want you to think about how we're currently navigating society. We are masked up. We are socially and physically distanced from each other. And that is in such alignment and is so cohesive, oftentimes with the masks that individuals living with mental illness often wear as well. The difference is that we can't take those masks off. In some ways, the masks help us thrive and survive and succeed. And in other times, those masks can feel really limiting. And so I want you to think about this. And I hope that when you leave our conversation today, you kind of take note of if you're out in the community, you're at work, maybe you go to the grocery store, when you look at another person wearing their mask, right, protecting themselves from what we're all dealing with COVID, we aren't able to identify what's going on behind that mask, whether there's a smile, a frown, there's sadness, there's hopelessness, there's excitement, there's, whatever that feeling might be. We're not always able to see that from the outside looking in. So this concept is what's really going to shape the conversation today about how our society either encourages people with mental health conditions to keep it together, and the hard work that often comes along with that. So here in the chat box, please take an opportunity, a moment. We're going to pause here. Share with me, what are some examples of public mental health stigma? So this can be messages, stereotypes, behaviors. What comes to mind for you when you think about public mental health stigma? Social media posts on being weak if you ask for help. The use of the word crazy, unpredictable. You have no reason to be sad, just get over it. Calling people by their diagnosis, institutionalization. Doctors looking at you funny when depression is on your list of medical issues. People say mental health is a weakness, it's not real. Being judged, they're special. There's fear associated with it. Maybe how people are so quick to judge. Everyone on meds is really sick or damaged. People will say that someone else always has it worse, that something is wrong or weakened, that therapists can't be affected by the current events. We hear messages around public or attention seeking. You just need sun. I've heard that many times. And what's happening in here doesn't always change whether I have a tan or not. Feeling different. Stigma might look like limited opportunities. It's overgeneralized. There's the message of stay away from those kinds of people. If someone gets angry, they're called bipolar. Attention seeking. People with mental illnesses are not normal. So you can see all of these fantastic responses coming in. Since we have 200 people here in this room, I'm not going to have the time to read them all, but think about how those messages impact either you, the professionals you work with, the individuals you serve, or how you view mental health on that macro level. So within the healthcare system, within the criminal justice system, within the legislature. Think about it in that context, and then shift that into looking at what are examples of internalized stigma. So how is that different? What are the messages, stereotypes, and behaviors that you see, hear, or maybe have felt that represent internalized stigma? I'm not good enough. People feel undeserving of assistance or services. There's something wrong with me. Low self-esteem. I'm not good enough to be normal, not capable of something. I'm broken. I can't meet everyone's eyes. I'm broken. I can't be fixed. We see a couple of shame coming in. Hopelessness. This depression won't get better. I'm embarrassed. There's vulnerability. I can't. What's wrong with me? I should be able to handle this myself. Isolated. Absolutely. Am I a psychopath? Does it make me a criminal? It's a vicious cycle. I'm disabled. I'm not able to hold a job. I'm embarrassed. I'm shy. I feel overwhelmed. I'm supposed to be helping others. Others just don't understand. I'm going to be like my father, who is a disorder. I don't deserve better. I'm better off dead. No one will understand. I don't want to be like those people on TV or in the movies. I'm the only one. So with all of that, I want us to take a pause. What we just read is a lot. It is deep. It is painful. It's real. It's honest. But there's also this silver lining of hope, because we all showed up here today, which means we care about reducing stigma and enhancing or changing or uprooting the messages, the stereotypes, and the behaviors that we sometimes see out in the community that folks internalize. And that absolutely impacts how they seek services, whether or not they stay engaged in therapy, medication management. It impacts their success in the workplace. It impacts the way that they relate in relationships and friendships, maybe the way they connect with their children, how they show up in their faith, and who they identify as support services, who they identify as informal supports in their own lives. So please take this with you, put it in the back of your mind, hold it in your heart, and take care of yourself as we continue this conversation. I know that many of us here, this impacts us near and dear. So this might be, reading all of this might feel overwhelming. It might feel emotional. Know that you have the Aurora team right here on the call with you. I'm also available after today's conversation, should you like to reach out. If you feel that you're in crisis or you need some immediate support, please take a pause, jump off the call, get in touch with the folks at the Crisis Response Network. There's a lot of support here for you. Here's some examples of what individuals who work at Bring Change to Mind, some other peers, had to say about what stigma feels like for them. Stigma exists when there are members of a group that are feared, despised, and loathed. In the long run, stigma produces a kind of isolation that grows through fear. When stigma comes from others, it makes me feel afraid. When stigma comes from me, I become ashamed. It's hard when you're at school and you hear things like that, and you have to pretend like nothing bothers you. So as we think about how stigma impacts the way people access services and supports, a lot of that is aligned with what is the community around that person. If we look at it from sort of that person and environment perspective, from a socio-ecological model, you have the individual, you have the relationships around them, whether they're intimate relationships with coworkers, with their community, with school systems, and then that spans out to community and larger society. So how we view ourselves, how we view each other, and how we view access to hope, support, autonomy, medication, insurance coverage, all of those things are certainly going to impact whether or not somebody reaches out for help. So if you are the person who is working in the field, please know that while you show up with courage, kindness, authenticity, expertise, knowledge, awareness of resources, for so many people living with a mental illness, either in moments of crisis or maybe who have never sought services and are kind of under the radar because they're out working, they're raising families, maybe they don't perceive themselves as in need of help. Please remember that while you show up to this work as an incredible human with a lot of knowledge and support, many times the peer doesn't necessarily know that or believe that because of the experiences that they've had in the past. So maybe they reached out for help previously and were met with judgment, were met with blame. They weren't able to access the services that they needed, or the wait lists were really long. Maybe they did reach out, but these services literally weren't available for them in that time. So we can see that when stigma is present, there are certainly harmful effects of that. We also know that it continues to promote marginalization of people living with mental illness. It continues to promote fear and stereotypes. And, we're seeing it in the news tragically right now of the connection between mental illness and violence. And there is a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of misperceptions around that. The automatic assumption that mental illness equates to violence and that violent incidents are therefore caused or preemptively connected to mental illness, there's not a ton of validity behind that. Certainly there oftentimes can be correlation, but I think we're really doing a disservice to the community and our growth and prevention when there is that automatic assumption of violence, criminality, and mental illness. We know that folks living with mental illnesses are far more likely to be victimized than to be the perpetrator of violence. So a few more harmful effects of stigma that I want to mention, clearly that stigma follows people into their workplace, their school, and many times it's not just stigma on the larger scale. Many times there's stigma from family and friends, and it's not often due to a lack of love or willingness or wanting to support, but there's just a lack of education. My family and I, we started off at ground zero. We had no idea what mental illness was about. We really had a lack of understanding. And I absolutely carried some stigmas about what it meant to live with a mental illness. And so we have a really great opportunity here today to not only share the experiences that you all have, the knowledge of what you're doing in the field, or the knowledge of living with a mental health condition or loving someone who does, but we can change the messages about ourselves and about others. As someone who's worked in the field and nonprofit, we're often limited by grants. We're often limited by reporting. We're often limited by documentation and standards and policies and procedures and legislation. And that all is so important, that matters, that guides the trajectory of our work. However, we don't want to lose the humanistic approach in the work that we're doing. We don't want to miss out on the opportunity to really meet people where they're at and recognize that while our organization or our family or our church maybe doesn't promote or feed into stigma, the individual seeking help or support is experiencing it all around them regularly. So we can actively be a part of the solution. And obviously you're doing that by being here today. So with a lot of information thrown out at you, I want to pause here and ask you in the chat box to share with us what you think implicit bias is, either through your own experience, your professional expertise. What does that mean? What is implicit bias? I see this question might be a little more difficult. I like it. Paulette bravely shares as the first one in the chat box. A bias a person has which they are unaware of. Spot on. A bias that is intended, question mark. Good, okay, so we're not quite sure. Automatic assumption of someone or something based not on fact. When something happens and it confirms what we already believe to be true. A bias that someone grew up with, it's unquestioned. It's unconscious prejudice or favoritism. Maybe assumptions, stereotypes, not being neutral. A bias that seems normal to the person, feeling a particular way about a group of people, and biases we are unaware of. Perfect. So I'm pushing this out to you for you to do the work, and you showed up. You're absolutely right in the notion that implicit biases are attitudes or stereotypes which affect our understanding, our actions, our decisions, the way we respond to people, to situations, and it's all done unconsciously. We also call this, subconscious or unconscious bias. And unconscious bias, implicit bias, is something that we all have. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's how we execute that. So that's the explicit bias. That's the intentional, we're aware of our behaviors, we're aware of our responses, and we're aware whether it is positively or negatively impacting people. So with implicit bias, like I said, it's something we all have. It depends on how we use it, and it depends on how self-aware we are. We have opportunities to change our implicit biases, but we can't do that unless we're aware of what they may or may not be. So implicit bias is the quick, automatic, emotional, impulsive responses or beliefs or attitudes that we have. And many times those responses are based on past experience. So take a simple example of a dog bite. If somebody was bitten by a dog as a child, that experience shapes the way for them moving forward of what they believe about dogs, maybe their actions of whether they interact with dogs or not. They may build a stereotype that dogs are dangerous, they're harmful, they're unsafe, or maybe it's a type of breed that they have that bias about. They may not even be aware that they have that bias because of that experience, or they explicitly change their actions or their behaviors because of the experience. So as we just kind of mentioned, the majority of that implicit bias, it's that fast, emotional, automatic, we're not even aware necessarily that we carry those beliefs. So the hope is we can actually pause, get away from the immediate first reactions that we make about others and ourselves, and move into a slower, more deliberate, intentional way of viewing the needs of people with mental illness, the way we can do our work and truly meet people where they're at. And I wanted to share a really great quote. I thought this was fantastic. There is Project Implicit Mental Health. It was actually founded through Harvard, and they have some really incredible implicit bias tests. You can go online and find that. It's at Project Implicit Health. And this quote says, the more people are aware of their own biases, the more they may be able to slow down and act in ways that are aligned with their values. So keep this in mind as we look back on the masks that people wear, what we believe about mental illness because of what we've been through, what we've seen, people we've helped, people on the street, people we see on television, what happens in the media. All of this impacts the way that we show up. So with all of that being said, the message that I really want to share, and I hope that you can implement in your work, in your conversations with others, and for those of you who are also peers living with a mental health condition, that we remember recovery is individually defined. It is absolutely a journey. It is a winding road of ups and downs and steps forward and steps backwards. And I really want to make clear that while recovery is personally defined and it's, autonomous to that individual, we want to make sure as a larger community or continuum of care that we don't place value on other people's recovery. So for recovery, that might look like having, a job in a professional realm for somebody. Recovery might look like getting out of bed and taking a shower. Recovery might look like advancing a particular skill in therapy. I mean, recovery is on a trajectory. And so just a good reminder for us all that it's not a one size fits all, but the trek through recovery, which is an ongoing process, is absolutely worth it, in my opinion. With that being said, how many of you have ever felt this way when you were diagnosed with a mental illness or you worked with somebody who was, and you thought, yeah, I support mental health. Let's talk about it. Let's work on prevention. And suddenly it impacts you personally. It impacts you deeply. And you feel like you kind of got knocked down. I absolutely felt like that. And so, for individuals who have been diagnosed or love someone who has, remember that you're not alone in feeling like you got completely knocked down. So for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with my experience and my story, I was diagnosed with mental health issues when I was 17 years old. I got a diagnosis of bipolar disorder 1 and didn't grow up having, a lot of symptoms outside of some anxiety as a child and into my teens. And so suddenly being diagnosed with a serious mental illness absolutely shaped the way I viewed myself, my capacity, my future, and the way that people in my life would look at me moving forward, like it was an absolute death sentence. So these are quotes that I pulled from a journal that I kept after being diagnosed at the age of 17. I'm a weak member of the mentally ill, being moved along in life like a herd of infected cattle. Crazy girls like me are looked upon as a lost cause and only useful for dinnertime gossip. I have to live with this title forever, like it's some kind of dog tag hanging around my neck. I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. Everything is fine. I don't want anybody to know that I'm crazy, I'm weak, I'm a lunatic, I'm ill, I'm not strong enough to handle this on my own. These were all those stigmatizing messages that I assigned to myself. I was fortunate in having a really great support system early on from my family, but that didn't change the way I viewed myself. That didn't change the shame and the fear and the humiliation and embarrassment. And so as we go back to that mask analogy, I show you a picture where in the front left, I sit smiling. I'm the captain of the varsity cheer squad. I'm making good grades. I'm involved in student council. I'm all of these things that were once so important to me. But what you don't see behind that smile is a girl who's going home and self-harming and cutting on her lunch break. A girl that's struggling with bulimia after being put on medications that caused weight gain. What you don't see is a girl who absolutely despises the shameful experiences that she's lived through. And so as we look at stigma, both, internally, and we look at public stigma, this is absolutely what it feels like for so many of us that are diagnosed. I felt like I'm this fish, over here, and my life will never be the same. If I were to tell you that, gosh, I'm almost 37, so I'm going on sort of my 20-year anniversary, if you will, of living with a bipolar diagnosis. In August of this year will mark 20 years since I was in a psychiatric hospital on suicide watch and self-harming and, living through some pretty scary manic episodes and depression. And if you were to tell me then that I would be speaking to all of you here today, that I would be working in the field, that I would have the opportunity to learn and grow from all of you in authentic, powerful, honest ways, I would have never believed you in a million years. And that's because of the shame. That's because of the stigma that I felt, that much of it was self-inflicted. But I really believed that if I'm silent about this, everybody else in my world will be silent about it as well. And so, you know, it makes me emotional to think about how many of you here in this room have supported my journey from being a really broken teenager to realizing I wasn't broken. I just needed new skills to glue myself back together. And it's something that I will never, ever forget, that no matter how professional I am, and no matter how successful I may feel, and feel really proud to be successful and have worked hard to be where I'm at, I will never shed myself of some shame that I continue to feel, of some of the stigma that I experience in my world every day. So a huge thank you to all of you, whether you're peers or professionals, for showing up and caring and being proactive about these issues, because 17-year-olds newly diagnosed with bipolar disorder like me, who lived as though, you know, my future is bleak, I'm never going to be able to be or do anything, you're life changing. And so if you haven't been thanked by a colleague, a peer, a patient, a friend, a family member, a child, I am going to take the brave leap and thank you, and thank you on their behalf. Thank you so much for some of those comments that are coming in. I see you. I really appreciate you. The next question I'm going to kind of pose to you in the scope of mental illness, stigma, fear, shame, implicit bias, messages and behaviors that we see, you know, whirling around us all the time. What is autonomy to you? Whether it's your own autonomy or autonomy that you practice in the work that you do, what does autonomy mean for you? Share with me in the chat box. Taking leadership, being able to run my own life, freedom, individuality, able to do things on my own, self-directed, independence. We are our own person, in control over our own actions. Self-determination, free to be me, self-governing, independence, being able to do whatever you want by your choice without pressure, making choices, being okay with yourself, making my own decisions, self-directed, your superhero power, being able to do things independently, self-run, independent, taking care of business on your own, being the final person to decide what my life is like, acceptance of myself, independence, functioning independently, taking responsibility, freedom, being the captain of my own ship, able to make my own decisions, being a participant in my life. Beautiful. If you ever forget what autonomy means to an individual you work with or someone that you love, you got it right here. This is what autonomy means. It is the right for an individual to direct their path based on their own values and decisions. And so as I learned about what autonomy meant early on, after a few years of struggle, after a few years of saying, I'm not taking this crap, a few years ago, and you know, what the hell, I'm off meds, I don't want to be bipolar. It didn't go well because I had follow-up hospitalizations and was, you know, withdrawn on medical leave from college, and it didn't work out for me in a positive way. But I was able to take those struggles and realize that I'm the leader in my life. The people surrounding me can love me, support me, you know, blame me, judge me, criticize, uplift, empower. But at the end of the day, I have to be the one to do those things. And so through some lots of love from family and incredible support from my psychiatrist, from peer supports, I was able to recognize that I have choice to a certain extent of my safety, and wellness. And so some of the things that I found to be helpful that I hope you can utilize as a resource as well is, especially if you work in the field, you arrive with a great deal of experience, expertise. You may have 15 letters behind your name, and that is valuable. But also remember that what you perceive as need, what you identify as goals in case management, next steps, increasing access, safety and wellness might look very different to the person that you're serving. So, meeting them where they're at, recognizing their autonomy and the choices that they make, you may well recognize they're not healthy. They're probably not advantageous to their recovery. However, they have some freedom many times in the choices that they make. Situation depending, they may or may not, depending, if they're, within the criminal justice system, if they are limited by, different abilities, things like that obviously play into that. Autumn, you mentioned a RAP plan. So this is exactly what this is. This is a wellness recovery action plan. And Mary Ellen Copeland actually was the founder of this. And I learned about RAP plans early on. And you can Google RAP, W-R-A-P, not music rap. And you can download copies of this. And this was huge in learning about my recovery. This was huge in shifting that self-stigma of I'm worthless. I'm never going to be loved. This is humiliating. I'm never going to get a job. They're never going to think I'm capable of doing my job. I was able to shift that and go, you know what? Like, I think I can do this. It's not going to be easy, but I'm going to build that support system. When I crash, I'm going to crash, but I'm going to get back up, and really buy in to my own safety and wellness. So these are plans that we can put together before things get interesting, before we meet struggle, before crisis occurs. And so if you're not using these in your practice or your services, please do. I know there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of documentation, but this is, at least in my experience, was a really tangible way for me to have autonomy and ownership over what my next steps were going to be. And it also helped me learn how to advocate for myself. For a long time, if you were to ask me, Erin, what do you need? I have no idea. What do you want? I don't want anything. What do you like? I don't have any likes. What did you used to do? I don't remember the old Erin. What makes you smile? I don't smile anymore, right? Like those would have been my answers and responses. So as, as messages came into me about, as messages came in and shifted that self-stigma, I came up with a plan of, well, if something happens and I'm not able to advocate for myself, I want to let folks know ahead of time. This is what I need. This is what I prefer. And so this was provided to my doctor, my family, my friends. I had a copy myself. So put it together when you're feeling well, when you can advocate for yourself, and let your providers and family and peers know when you're feeling good. What does that feel like? What does it look like? What are your triggers and what are your expectations or hopes of other people? Are there warning signs that people can look out for? If there is a needed intervention, are there certain hospitals or services that you prefer or don't prefer? Are there medications that, work for you? Write down your medications. What are the doses of those medications? Is there something that you don't want to take because you've had an adverse experience? So this is a great tool to really be proactive in what recovery might look like for someone. Part of my recovery was being best friends with medication. I didn't love it. I didn't love it early on. I was someone who would feel better. And then I was like, I've had enough of you, and would stop taking medication. So for me specifically, this is something I've taken meds every single day since I was 18. It took some pretty horrific situations to go, you know what? If I look at this for what it is, a brain condition, a brain disorder, a medical issue, there's no reason I wouldn't treat a physical condition. I wouldn't, stop taking medication if I were diabetic or living with cancer or had an autoimmune disorder. So again, it's about kind of shifting and shaping that perception. So as we wrap up our time together, this is kind of the narrative that I hope that you can take with you, that if anyone has made you feel invisible or less than, write a new narrative on your heart. And I absolutely learned to do that early on, because I decided, the way I show up, the way I talk about my experience, whether I disclose or don't disclose, that's up to me. And so some strategies that you can use. NAMI is an incredible resource. I'm sure the majority of us know about them. The family to family class was the first formal support that my family ever got, and it was life-changing for us. So, strategies to make that shift from maybe you're a peer to you want to provide advocacy or you want to be your own advocate, and into allyship and what that means. Educate yourself. Think about and be conscious of the language that you're using. Remind people that those words do matter, and correct others in a empowering education type situation where you're not badgering them. Yes, if it's offensive, you can certainly let them know, but provide facts, share your experiences, because they may also have those implicit or explicit biases with them. And then also encourage equality. Arizona has done really great work around the parity law. If you're not familiar with Jake's Law, I absolutely encourage you to take a look. We can type in the chat box there, the GEM Foundation, which was founded by Ben and Denise Denslow after losing their son to suicide. And so Jake's Law, in honor of their son Jake, was passed last legislative session and signed by the governor, and is going to do incredible things to ensure that Arizona is honoring the National Federal Parity Act. So again, normalizing mental health with physical health, and then thinking about your roles specifically, okay? Whether you're a provider, peer, family member, or a concerned citizen, what's the difference? And there's no answer for this that I'm going to provide to you, so just FYI. But what's the difference between providing someone support? What does that look like? Is it empathetic listening? Is it follow through? Is it connecting them to resources? Is it showing up in the middle of the night with food? Is it providing transportation to doctor's visits? Is it, that's, we can define that however we want. Then what's it mean to be an advocate? What does it mean to advocate for yourself, your own needs, to talk about what decisions you hope to be made, honoring your agency, or to advocate on behalf of others, to advocate at the legislature, to advocate for awareness and education in schools, in workplaces, in the criminal justice system? And then what's the difference between those things and becoming an ally? I want you to think about this as we close out our time here together. Know that being an ally is really hard work. Now, allyship is different in the fact that allyship is you're supporting and advocating for or on behalf of or alongside a population or a community of people that you do not belong to. So I identify as an LGBTQ plus ally. I do not belong to that community. However, I recognize there are benefits and privileges that I carry in being a heterosexual cisgender woman. And I want to utilize that to share and honor the voices of individuals who experience oppression. So we can apply that to mental health, that if you're someone who's not living with a mental illness, you can still be an ally and know the work is not about you, but you can still be an ally and stand up for and on behalf of those individuals for their needs. And that can be scary. There can be a lot of pushback, and you might make a lot of mistakes along the way. And that's really where we learn and where we grow and where we see change happen. And so I'm hoping that whether you're someone who's providing support, whether you're somebody who is doing advocacy for yourself or others, or you're standing in allyship with individuals living with mental illnesses, I really hope that what we've talked about today can continue to enhance the work that you're doing. And I'm just so grateful that you've joined me here today. And I look forward to future collaborations and conversations. As I mentioned, we have a lot going on at Peace of My Mind in addition to some of those upcoming trainings. So we've got a brief 5 minutes left. I will open up the chat box here. I know that we've got Cassandra helping out with that as well. If we have questions that come in, I can absolutely provide my email here. If you prefer, either due to time or confidentiality, if you prefer emailing me directly, you can do that. But here in this space, do we have questions that are coming through right now or we have not addressed?
It looks like someone has a pretty specific question for you. So what I'm going to do is take this down and then I can send it to you to follow up unless they want to reach out to you directly. But otherwise, just a lot of really great comments, a lot of support, a lot of people saying that they can relate. Yeah, a lot of just really good comments, but nothing that we haven't addressed so far, thankfully.
Yeah. Rhonda, you share elders with mental health issues is a challenge. I 1000% agree. I think there is the challenge of generational perceptions of depression, anxiety, mental health. I also think there is stigma around when you age, it's depressing, and like the two go hand in hand, which is not the case. And older individuals are often less likely to reach out for help because of that notion of like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. And then finally, I think our society and community needs to do a better job of recognizing the unique challenges that older individuals experience because services are not accessible to them in the same way as they may be to a 20-year-old or a 60-year-old. So absolutely spot on with that. I'm also, before I forget, I'm also going to pop in a link for you that I would love your feedback. I'm going to put in a link and it's going to be sent out in an email as well. But I would love your feedback in this brief evaluation. It should take less than a minute or 2 minutes. And then also there's an opportunity in there if there's a specific type of training or informational session or podcast that you would like to see Peace of My Mind facilitate or put together, there's an opportunity to share that as well. So thank you. All of your feedback and your comments are just so enriching to my heart and my profession, and your support means the world. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Link says invalid. Okay, we'll go ahead and send it through the email. I appreciate you sharing that, Elizabeth. The name of the podcast is Through the Mess, and it's not live yet. So know that you're not missing out on anything. It will launch it'll launch in May. So it's Through the Mess, Mental Health Unfiltered.
Wonderful. Well, we will keep this up for a few minutes here, but first and foremost, we'll do it's sad because virtually like this, it's a little silent. The comments, if they're not applause, I don't know what they are. But thank you for the wonderful presentation and for sharing and really sharing your story and being open, being that example of speaking to the stigma that exists. We appreciate you so much, and we're so glad that you could come in and present and share.
Thank you, Jordan. As you mentioned, I had the huge privilege of meeting you a few years back and getting familiar with the incredible work that is happening at Aurora. And so thank you for the heart and the passion that you bring to the community and individuals living with mental illness. It never goes unnoticed. So I appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, with that being said, again, we'll keep this open here for a few minutes if additional questions are coming in. I know some people maybe are typing. I did want to give a few announcements to the community as well here as we're wrapping up a little bit. But I I'm happy to announce we officially got to cut the red tape on this one. We were just announced for our 4th consecutive year as the #1 behavioral rehabilitation hospital in the state of Arizona. And we are incredibly grateful and humble for that. That was done via community votes from all of you. So thank you so much for supporting Aurora, for supporting the things that we do for the community and our work to collaborate with the community. Without your support, it's tough to do. And so we're so thankful for that. So wanted to share that. Erin, you had mentioned a podcast, and I'm hoping at one point maybe we can get you on it. We also launched a podcast series just recently. It is called Minding Our Mental Health. We currently have 1 episode available. You can find it on our website. It's right there at the front page at auroraarizona.com. And then if you don't like to go to websites for podcasts, because who does? You can also go on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts, and you can find it there as well. Again, it's called Minding Our Mental Health. In addition to that, I also just got more exciting news. You guys are getting this fresh, hot off the press. No one knows it yet, except for maybe like 2 people. But starting next week, our Tempe location, our outpatient clinic over there, we are going to be launching an older adult IOP program for individuals 55 years and older. We know that's kind of a consistent need that's within our community, and we are going to begin accepting referrals and starting some of our assessments for that right away. So if you have any questions, again, I know myself, Cassie, and Debbie have shared our information in here. We'd be happy to help get you some flyers and things like that this week, but definitely wanted to let you guys all know. And then lastly, we love this CEU series. I know in years past when these were in person with the Lunch and Learns, we were providing these usually about 9 or 10 months out of the year. It is our goal to fill the entire calendar this year. We want to provide this to you January through December. And part of that is we are actively recruiting. It is an IOP program. Oh, sorry, that was Cassie. My bad. But with that, we wanted to let you know we're actively recruiting speakers. There's a few requirements. We do need to make sure that whoever is presenting, if you have a subject matter, someone that is passionate to share their story or what they do or the populations they work with, please reach out to us. Our main requirement is that we do ask you to have a master's level or above in the behavioral health or mental health field. But we are looking to fill that calendar for the rest of the year. So if you know someone or you're interested yourself, we encourage you, please reach out. Wonderful. All right. How are we doing? Cassie, do we have any more questions or anything like that? Paulette, you do need to relocate to sunny Arizona. Do it before the weather gets awful because it's beautiful right now.
So it looks like a lot of comments, some congratulations about being #1 again, which is awesome. And someone asking to send an email about being a speaker, which I can definitely include when I follow up with everyone with their CEUs.
Wonderful. Perfect. Yes, we do miss the Lunch and Learns as well. Maybe one day we'll bring them back. I saw that though. Maybe we'll do a hybrid. We know sometimes it's hard to get away from the office or be able to come physically to the facility. So maybe we'll do something that's a little bit of a mix for everybody. Let's see here. Well, all righty, folks. If we don't have any additional questions, we will go ahead and end the meeting here. And I hope that sincerely you all have a wonderful rest of your week. And thank you again for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next time. So be sure to look out for our next emails and our social media posts.